record here, and we are ready to go. You know, it amazes me how many businesses start podcasts and then quit. They don't see the results they expect. They didn't realize how hard it would be and how much work it would take. Yet there are numerous advice givers on how to grow and monetize a podcast or a YouTube channel. And yet most shows still fail. Why? What is going on here? Is there bad advice? Well, actually, yes, there's a lot. But is there good advice and yet shows still fail? Well, yes. So what's the issue? Welcome to Profitcast. I'm the Real Brian, and we're going to talk about this today. We're starting a new chapter of Profitcast, and I just want to welcome Seth Silvers. Thanks for joining me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here and looking forward to many episodes of Profitcast together.
Oh, yeah, me too, man. And I'm glad you're with me. I'm excited. We're going to be having a lot of fun, by the way. And by the way, for those of you who have been with Profitcast for a while now, Profitcast has been going on since 2014, technically. But we've had some changes over the years and stuff. And then Kayla Wells came on, K-Dubs, and she's also still part of the show, but mostly taking a break right now and, coming on periodically. But Seth and I are going to be spearheading the effort moving forward. And we're really excited about where we're going this time. We've got a little bit more specific of a goal, and we've definitely got some good takeaways for you. So we're going to share a little bit more about ourselves for those of you who don't know Seth or me in a few minutes. But before we get into that, let's talk about what we're doing and how we're going to be of service to you. Our goal and our purpose of doing the show is to speak to how businesses can start and grow a profitable podcast. I mean, it's really that simple. Unfortunately, most businesses don't do it correctly at all. And so that's why we see a lot of failure. That's why we see a lot of podcasts quitting and that kind of thing. Now, we primarily work with businesses and entrepreneurs, but of course, this can apply to anyone that wants to start or even has a podcast, but you're wanting to do it correctly and learn how to, to monetize, to profit, to grow, all that good stuff. So we're pretty excited about this one. And we've got some new changes. We didn't do our traditional musical intro. We're just diving right in because, hey, ain't nobody got time for that. All right. So one thing, by the way, we will have show notes in the description below. We'll have that in your podcast app, however you want to get in touch with that. If you'd like to work with us, if you'd like more information on what we do, definitely check that out. But let's jump into this one. So I think, Seth, you and I have seen this, and especially working with clients, we've seen podcasts start. We've seen a lot of podcasts start. Businesses start podcasts. I've worked with so many clients over the years where they've started a podcast and they get all excited and they get going and they almost every one of them. Wow. I had no idea how much time this would take. I had no idea how much money this would take. This is crazy. This is overwhelming. We're not seeing the results we expected. We didn't know what, it's just so many things. Expectations, I think, are really going to be a huge theme throughout this podcast that we're going to continue to talk about is, are your expectations set correctly? Because this is a big deal. But I've seen that it's approximately 90%, give or take, of podcasts that will quit within the first year.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So
and you'll hear different numbers across the board. I think we say 90%, some say 80%, some sources say there's 2.7 million podcasts, some say 4 million, some say 5 million.
Yeah.
Why there's that much variety, it's complicated. I don't exactly know. But the point is there is a lot of podcasts out there. And I would say between 4 and 5 million, and there's only around 300,000 podcasts that publish an episode every single month. And so that's some of the things we want to talk about is, man, there are so many more podcasts out there that then initially choose to no longer create content. A lot of people in the industry call it pod fade. Yeah. I think it's actually even worse for, I don't know, I have data to show this. I feel like it's worse for business podcasts because I think businesses or brands or entrepreneurs, they come in thinking, oh, this is going to be the silver bullet that grows my business. And then it maybe doesn't go how they think. And so they're like, well, don't have the budget for this anymore. And so we're not mentioning like an exact stat and source.
Yeah.
Because those will probably change as the industry evolves. But it's a lot. A lot of shows don't make it to the first year.
Yeah, without mentioning any names or throwing anyone under the bus, I certainly never ever want to do that on this show. But it's amazing, just working with specific clients over the years and some of the things that they've thought. Sometimes it's been, the happy accidents too. But a lot of times they come in and they have these specific goals. But, so here's something. You'll hear advice out there that it could be marketing advice, growth advice. It could be equipment advice. It could be how consistent you how many, episodes you publish and how consistent you are with it. So many different things. And so people think, oh, that's not that bad. It's easy. Let's just get into it. Let's just grab like a blue microphone and an iPhone or something and just go to town and, forget a microphone. Let's just, there's all kind. So, I mean, I'm passionate about the equipment side of things and how you sound because growing up in the radio days, but when it comes to marketing and packaging and content strategy, those are so important too. And so many people, businesses, entrepreneurs, they start a podcast and they don't do it correctly. They don't start it correctly. They don't set it up correctly. And then they go out there 3 months, 6 months, a year later, they're going, what's going on? Why didn't we see this explode? Why don't we have 1 million listeners? Why aren't we, top of the charts right now? Why aren't we making all this money from the show? There's so many things that I think they go, did you actually realize what was going to go into it? Here's another thing. How many times, Seth, have you seen the proverbial, hey, here's an email. We're launching a podcast. They get all excited. They share that. And then that's the last thing they say about their podcast.
Yep.
Happens all the time. So there's so many things that businesses do wrong, and we really want to help you set it up correctly the first time and do it right. And I would also say that if you're having issues right now with the current podcast, it's clearly not set up correctly and you're not doing the right things in order to grow. So it's possible to do. And granted, is this a get rich quick thing? Is this going to, save your business like you said? Probably not, right? This is not, right. It's not the way it is anymore. It's a long-term kind of thing. And so we're really going to dive into what it really takes. And in fact, one of the things that I was going to share towards the end of the episode, but I'm going to say it right now actually, is that we both have talked about not slacking on our content, making sure that we are as prepared as we possibly could be. And if there's something that we know, we're going to share it. If there's something that we don't know, we're going to humble ourselves and say, hey, we don't know the answer to this. We're going to go find out what the answer is, or we're going to test it. But we're also going to expect you to make sure you don't slack on it either. If you're going to do this with us, if you're going to do a podcast for your business, then you're going to persevere, you're going to have grit and determination, and you're going to see it through to the end. That's our goal. So that's my idea.
I mean, it's important. It's super important with it. I think the expectations that people have coming into podcasting is important. And realizing like our vision for this show is that this can be a journey for how do we do podcasting in a profitable way. I love the name Profitcast. It's simple. People that are podcasting want to make money doing it. And that doesn't mean that you need to make money to be a successful podcaster. And we'll talk about how there's other ways to do that. But at the end of the day, if you are podcasting, then you want to know that there's an ROI behind it, especially if you're a business. Part of the reason we're going to be talking a lot about the business side is because in our culture and in our society, a lot of how media works ends up being shaped by how businesses are using those media formats. And so for this, I think podcasting is one of the most authentic ways to communicate. And I think we all know we're lacking authenticity in the business space. So I think we can bring those two worlds together. And I'll share more about my story later, but that's kind of where like my passion is with it. So I think there really is this opportunity for people to do it really well, but I think often our expectations are in the wrong place, or we don't have the strategy, or we're comparing podcasting to other platforms and different ways that it shouldn't be. All of these things factor into people starting a show and then a couple episodes in being like, you know what, this isn't what was promised to me. I also want to mention one of my favorite quotes is by Gary Vee. He says, marketers ruin everything. And after he says that, he says like, oh, I know I'm part of the problem. And so I think almost with any platform, there is a platform that comes to the market. People run into the platform. They love the platform. Then businesses figure out how to use the platform. Then they monetize it. Then they make it worse for the consumers. And then it's this cycle. Then the consumers jump to a new platform. Then the businesses jump. So the marketers kind of do ruin everything. And I do think there is a ton of podcasts that are not podcasting anymore because there are a lot of marketers and a lot of businesses that have said, oh, podcasting is easy. It's like this get rich quick thing. It will grow your business really fast. And then they sell you $1,000 course or a $95 course or a $10,000 course or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, this is easy. And so then there's, that happens. I was looking at somebody the other day and they help people podcast. And so I looked, this took like 2 hours, but I went down the rabbit hole and I was like, man, I got to figure this out. So I looked at their program. They did like a group program last year. Yeah. And, I looked at they had all of the people that were in their program, and I looked up every one of their podcasts. It was like 30 or 40 podcasts. And I think one or two of them was still active, and every one of them
Oh my gosh.
every one of them sounded terrible. Like I would never listen to one. And so it was just this interesting thing where it was like, this person probably made like $80,000 on this launch, helping people start their podcasts.
Yeah.
But so I think there's some things like that that perpetuate some of the learnings. And so our vision for this show is that we can say, hey, let's share what we've learned along our journey of helping businesses launch and grow podcasts. And also let's be totally transparent about the questions that we have and bring other people in to help answer those questions. So this can kind of be a place where all of us can learn together how we can get better and better at helping podcasts be a really authentic tool for businesses.
I love it. I wanted to kind of touch on that, and I'm glad you brought that up because I did not have that anywhere in the notes that I wanted to share, Seth, but it's interesting how I was in podcasting back in the 2010 to 2013 range is kind of when things got started. I was still doing radio and other things, but I was curious at that time. And, back in the day, that was the Cliff Ravenscrafts and the Pat Flynn's, were kind of the gurus. And John Lee Dumas had just started Entrepreneur on Fire, which is now Entrepreneurs on Fire. And so, things that was 2010 actually, but it's amazing how things have changed. But you're right, how much out there, it was like, come learn how to podcast, come learn how to make money with a podcast, grow a podcast, everything. I took all the courses, not all of them. I took a lot of the courses. I spent a lot of money. I got to be honest. I've spent thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars over the years trying to learn this kind of stuff and growing and joining these groups. And long story short, and by the way, when I did Profitcast in 2014 to 2016, it was interviewing a lot of these people and asking them their stuff. And so long story short, what I kind of came down to is that there was this kind of, I don't know if you want to call it like this stigma that you had to do these things, and then you're going to be fine and you're going to work and everything's going to be great. Then all of a sudden that just changed. Well, you can't just grow a podcast overnight. It's not a get rich quick thing. It's like it went from you can get rich on this really quick to you're not going to get rich. And I was just like, wait a minute, why did that just shift all of a sudden? And so it was kind of fascinating to hear that kind of stuff over the years. But then the other thing I realized is that people were promoting this is how you follow this roadmap and you'll be successful. But what it was that it was, here's how I was successful, which of course that's all anyone can ever really speak to, let's be honest. But it was let's just say I, the Real Brian, am successful and I'm going to show you how I did it. Well, if you are like me, my personality, and you have a lot of the same tendencies, you might actually do really well by following my roadmap. But if you're not like me, you might struggle. You might not succeed because you're not like me. It's the way it is. We're all different. We all have different kinds of ways of doing things and stuff. And so what I've equated the way that podcasting has become is very much like multi-level marketing, network marketing. It's the whole, I'm going to show you how to make money with your podcast by showing others how to make money, by showing others how to, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Join my downline for $1,000 and, you're going to learn how to do this so that you can teach others to do it. Well, there's those of us in there. I'm one of them. I don't want to go and create courses. I want to host podcasts. I want to profit and make money by hosting shows, so there's those of us that are, we're different, I guess. And so the whole point is that I've seen the goods and the bads of the industry over the years, and I'm ready to really get down to the brass tacks of how have these shows succeeded correctly? The things you've seen and you've got, Seth, the experience and the knowledge that you've got, which is a lot, by the way. We're going to learn from that, but we're also going to try it. We're going to test it, and we're going to report back like this did work, or this didn't work. Let's try something different. Mm-hmm. We're not going to hold this crap back. We're not going to blow sunshine up your butt and do all kinds of other things because we want you to succeed. I mean, that's the only way. Like you said, join my course. 2 podcasts are active out of the 30 in the group. That's not a good thing. That's a bad testimonial, so we'd like to, anyway. One thing I was just going to say really quickly, by the way, too, if you're somebody, and believe me, I have a huge passion for fun things. I love nerding out on fun things. But if you're somebody that is podcasting for fun, it's a hobby, you love doing it, great. This is probably not the show for you, by the way, because you're not going to really care about this. You're just there to have fun. Now, you can learn stuff, but I just want you to know that we're really getting into the actual growth and monetization of a profitable podcast here, too. So, follow us for that and that kind of thing, too. The other thing, too, and I know I'm going to get this. Some of you are going to say, well, I already have a podcast and I already know a lot of this stuff. My question back to you is, are you profitable? Have you grown and monetized your podcast where you want it to be? Assuming that that's what you're looking for. Or has it helped your business get to where it wants to be? If so, contact us because we'd love to have you on the show so we can learn from you. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah. So keep that in mind, by the way, as we are going to humble ourselves when we don't know something. We would love to have that as a mutual respect thing here. We're all learning together. I know things that I'm going to share. Seth knows things that he's going to share. You know things that you can share with us too. So this is a lovely circle of helping each other out.
Definitely. So, Brian, we do have some new listeners, and I'll share some about my story. But for those that haven't been listening to the last 136 episodes over the last 10 years with you,
yeah,
this is kind of an intro, welcome back episode. But can you kind of catch us up on how you ended up getting into this space, and then I'll do the same.
My gosh. Well, I appreciate that. And yes, so by the way, hello on YouTube. We are brand new on YouTube. And yes, we've been in the audio podcast space technically since 2014, and then took a break for many years, actually, because I got to a point where I had nothing else to say, and then decided I need to come back because I have more to say now. And so ready to kind of hit the new wave of where podcasting is right now. It's different. It's changed. So I grew up with the desire of being in actually radio. I wanted to be an online, not online, I wanted to be a morning show radio host. And I grew up listening to like old recordings of Orson Welles from the 30s and, Wolfman Jack and all that kind of stuff. And was like, dude, I want to do this. This is going to be so much fun. And well, as soon as I, of course, was able to get into radio professionally, radio was dying. And I was just like, well, that's not going to go anywhere. And so podcasting was also kind of in its process as I was figuring out radio wasn't going to go anywhere. So I kind of did stuff in the local space. I hosted private events. I hosted live events. I interviewed celebrities and actors and all that on stage and stuff. So I had a lot of fun doing interestingly enough, Seth, doing the live thing. Like yep. I didn't even get into the editing side of anything until 2013, I think is when I started. And I was like, why are we editing this? I mean, I've been doing live stuff ever since I was a kid. So anyway, it's kind of funny, but that's kind of how I got started. And then got into podcasting in 2013, actually with talking about TV shows. A lot of fun, by the way, reviewing them. And then also got into the business space and started to kind of do a hodgepodge of fun and then also professional stuff. And then since then, I've done a lot of different podcasts. I've hosted the Real Brian show, which has been going over 8 years now. And I'm sorry, more than 8 years. You got, it's those little like nuances of the English language. More than 8 years and more than 400 episodes. And it's been a lot of fun doing that. That's been a lot more of a fun show for me. Again, a morning show style. That's what I love. But doing Profitcast, I've hosted numerous podcasts for clients. And it's really, really cool because, they basically come to me and say, we need a podcast for our business. We don't have a host. We don't want to have a host. We just want to hire someone professional. And man, I love doing that. It's been a lot of fun. But I do the editing and the production and the voiceover side of things as well. So that's the general overview. There's a lot more behind it, but I'll stop there. But you, Seth, tell us about you.
Well, and I think it's so interesting that you have done podcast host for hire because a lot of people don't know that exists. And I think that could become more and more popular. Like I worked with a client over the last 2 years, and I actually think that if we would have pursued a podcast host for hire strategy for them, I think their show would still be going. But part of the reason the show shut down was because the co-owner of the company thought that they could do it. And they thought that, of course we had our concerns because they were super busy and all of this stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, they just didn't have the margin to be able to do that. Yes. And so being able to have somebody else that can actually host an industry related show. If you're listening and you're like, I didn't know that exists. Definitely exists. So I think that is super interesting. That's
actually one of the biggest reasons why I've been hired to host for these companies is because exactly that, the margin or the lack of knowledge. They're just like, we don't know, we don't have time to figure it out, and we don't have the capacity right now to stay consistent on a weekly basis. And so we'll hire somebody in.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool.
So for me, you mentioned John Lee Dumas earlier, and I actually got to spend time with him like a week or two ago. I think his podcast was actually the first one I listened to.
Oh, nice.
I very vividly remember right after I graduated college in 2013, and I was like sitting. I stayed with some friends, some family friends from church for like a month, and did some extra work in Tulsa before moving back to Oklahoma. And I remember sitting in the room and people being like, have you heard this podcast? And I don't think I had listened to any podcast before. I think that I had maybe listened to some that was, this is funny. My brain hasn't gone here in a long time. It was actually music playlists. It was like, I think that I remember like studying, and there were some like podcasts at the time where people were just doing like several hour long, like music, like throwing all the music in there. And I think that I remember
Interesting.
listening to podcasts that were just music in college,
Yeah.
but I remember hearing John Lee Dumas's and being like, wow, this is really interesting.
Mhm.
So during college, my journey kind of starts a couple years before that. I was actually watching the Super Bowl, and I remember I was always excited about the storytelling aspect. Always loved like, okay, let's hear the stories. I remember rewinding even more in high school, seeing Tom's Shoes and being like, oh wow, it's possible for businesses to actually like have an impact and a business model. So that was always really intriguing. And I remember watching the Super Bowl in college. It was probably with the stupid Patriots, but that's fine. Sorry if I just offended our listeners, but I'm not really sick of them anymore. I don't really care about the Patriots. Now I hate the Chiefs. So
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I just hate whoever's been beating us the most recently. Anyways, I remember watching the Super Bowl and being really excited for the ads, and then walking away and being like so underwhelmed, being like, this was like the best of the best. This is all of the best brands spending the best budgets, hiring the best production companies, and saying, you have 30 or 60 seconds to like get us to love your company.
Yeah.
And most of it is just really gimmicky. And so I remember that was the time where the question was planted in my brain of like, is it possible for businesses to actually market more through storytelling than just talking about the products? And so I kind of just like ruminated on it, wondered about it, wasn't thinking about podcasting at all, worked for a nonprofit for a few years in marketing. And then I started my own marketing agency to help small businesses market with storytelling. And I thought that was really specific. It was way too broad. I ended up saying yes to almost every project. Like I think I had a moment where I looked over a 6-year period and I was like, I think I only said no. I could think of like maybe 2 projects that I said no to. And I can promise you every project coming my way was not the right budget and was not the right fit. But we just said yes to everything. And then kind of stumbled into podcasting. Here in Fort Collins, me and my friend, we wanted to start a podcast telling stories of businesses in Fort Collins. Wasn't thinking about it like being a business development tool or it growing my business or any of that stuff. It was just like, we just want to tell these stories. So we did. I think I recorded 10 episodes, didn't know what I was doing, had ordered like $2,000 worth of recording equipment, messed all of them up, was ashamed about it, sat on the episodes for a year, ended up having to re-record all of them because I was embarrassed to publish them.
Yeah.
And then published that show. And then as soon as I did that, a couple other people were like, hey, can you help us with our show? And so I think my first editing was like $20 an episode or something.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was great.
It's good money back then, right? Until you know.
I literally thought it was great. And then over the last so that was about 5 years ago. And so continued to do podcasts. And then it was about 3 to 4 years ago that I kind of came to a fork in the road in business and just realized we need to focus on this. And so decided to just focus exclusively on helping businesses launch and grow podcasts. And really grateful for the journey. We've worked probably like half with hyper niche podcasts in industries like, financial services or real estate or parking. Yes, like parking cars, like the industry around parking cars.
Yeah.
We have like a cybersecurity podcast for medical devices, like as niche as you can think, and like making those work for businesses and understanding how to make it work. And then also getting to work with people like Mark Cuban or work on Patrick Lencioni's shows or working with Alex and Layla Hermosi or some of like the top business shows in the country. And that's been really cool to get to see kind of the balance of working with the big shows and seeing what works, and also working with the small shows and seeing what works and also what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's cool.
I love it. I think podcasting is such a good tool for businesses.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. We share a lot of the same, passions, which I think is interesting. And one thing I didn't share as much as, I was talking about kind of the network marketing approach, but some of the drive for me, over the years has been seeing podcasts that are incredibly good, by the way. And they put a lot of effort and time and work into it, and then they just burn out because they don't see the results that they want. And it's kind of like, what was missing? What did they do wrong? Because they did so much right. What did they do wrong? And so part of that has been, how do we fix that? Because there are ways to fix this kind of thing. And like you said, you've worked with some big shows, you worked with small shows, you've seen the gamut, and I love that. And the other thing, you're talking about the storytelling and stuff. It's so funny because some of the big companies I worked with over the years, I would host and they would kind of say, hey, we want you to ask these types of questions and just kind of, not necessarily stick to the script, but here are some things we want you to say and do and ask. And you know, you can ask a couple of follow-up questions, but keep it simple. Keep it about 7 to 15 minutes per episode, and that's it. And every one of these episodes ended up becoming sales pitches for products. And after a while, I would say, look, this is a commercial. It's a 7 to 15 minute commercial. Nobody cares. Yep. Nobody cares. We've got to share stories. We've got to share impact. And one of the results of that was this amazing company, by the way. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Leica Geosystems. They do cameras, LEICA, by the way, for those of you who are thinking like, which one is that? Anyway, they do all kinds of really great things, but they came out with this 360-degree camera that you could go and place in a room and it would just completely scan the room. And so it was cool because they brought one of the original guys from, you know, that was part of the development team. They brought him on to the show, and then they had a detective from one of the local police departments on the show as well. And so what they would do is they would talk about, here's what it does. And then the detective would say, and here's how we used it for crime scene investigation. And our crime scene investigation accuracy went up from like 30-something% to 90-something% just by using this one tool. And so they were talking about how they were able to find victims and like, they were able to find like who did what in order to help the victims or the victims' families. And anyway, it was this really, really cool story. So you're hearing about what it does and how it helps, but then you're hearing an actual practical real life use case for a very powerful thing that impacts people on a deeply personal level. And that episode exploded. It's just things like that. But they went from doing commercials on every single one of their episodes to changing over to something like that. And so I'm with you on the storytelling kind of piece. You know, the story that detective shared was heart-wrenching, you know, and also amazing. And that's what gets people. So anyway, I love that. I'm loving that you're into the story piece, and I am too. I would love to master storytelling. I'm not great at it. I like sharing stories, but you know, I'm all right. That's about it. So anyway, we're excited about where the show's going to be going, and we have a lot coming your way. But yeah, share with what you're working on, what's coming up next week, and all that good stuff. I'm curious because this is going to be a really cool resource for you.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to be talking through really kind of the exact. It's funny because you were slamming a roadmap. You used the word roadmap earlier, and you're like, everybody has their roadmap.
Oh, I wasn't slamming the. Hold on, let me just say. I wasn't slamming the roadmap in general. I was saying people forget that there's other personalities with their roadmaps. Yes, yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think part of the problem is often that people say this is the one plan that you should follow.
Yeah.
So next week we're going to talk through what I would actually say is kind of the exact roadmap for how to start and grow a podcast for your business. The caveat is it is going to be different. It's going to look different for every single company. So this really came from looking at all of the shows that we have worked on and being pretty honest about what were the commonalities between the ones that failed and also the ones that succeeded, and really putting that into, okay, here's kind of the 7 pieces that we think that every business podcast, really every podcast in general, should have. So we're going to break that down on next week's episode, which I think is going to be great. And then an ongoing basis, we're actually going to be updating these resources. And so if you are listening to this, then you can go to the businesspodcastroadmap.com and you're going to hear us talk about that every episode. And that's going to kind of be this like living, breathing kind of info hub and document that is totally free to access. And like it literally, we're putting all of our answers in there. We want this to be something where we can continually be adding new info to it every single month. That's going to help people to launch and grow their podcast. Because I just think that I don't want to work on every podcast, but I think that if we can put more info out there that helps people to grow their podcast, then it's good for the industry as a whole. So next week, we're talking through the 7-step process of how to grow your podcast. And if you want to see more of that before next week, you can go to the businesspodcastroadmap.com.
And what's cool is, like you said, we're going to be talking through this. And so it's a living, breathing resource for you that it's free. It's a resource like Seth just said, but we're also going to be talking through a lot of those parts of the roadmap. And also one of the things that I'm going to be doing, which I think will be a lot of fun too, is even talking about some of the equipment and some of the products and resources too, that we all just go, what should I get? Yeah. Like you said, everybody's different. There is no one size fits all, but at the same time, if there's one thing that I can't stand about review videos on YouTube is that they take you through this very long, tedious, it's too much information. Like, we're busy people. Like, I don't have 40 minutes to watch a review and just, I need a quick recommendation. We're here to recommend things for you. I'm still going to give you options, but unlike a lot of reviewers, they'll say, which one should you choose? Well, that's up to you. And then they just leave you hanging. I'm going to be like, okay, here are the top 3 that I recommend. Here's the one that I'm going to purchase for me.
Yep.
But it's going to be different for you, and I recognize that, but I'm still going to give you recommendations on what to actually go and do. Just like with all the other videos, we're going to give you recommendations. It may not work, but that's because everybody's different, but then we're going to give you some alternatives too. And so we're looking for ways to be able to say, here's what we recommend though. We're not trying to get you to try to figure it out on your own. So that's the goal. By the way, if you do want to get in touch with us directly, if you have any questions, maybe you have a question for us to answer on the show. You say, hey, can you guys talk about this on the show? We'd love to do that. Or if you want more information on Seth's company, Story On, or my company, Real Brian Media. By the way, we work together. It's exciting. We're doing a lot of stuff that's going to be super complimentary. Links are all in the description below in the podcast app or here on YouTube, either way, wherever you're listening or watching or anything like that. So you can get all that information and go from there. And by the way,
it's the internet, so it's probably not hard to find us or get a hold of us.
That's true. I know. And if you show up on our doorstep, be careful, because do you have 2 Dobermans? Is that what it is? And I've got a mountain lion.
No.
Mountain lion downstairs.
Mountain lion, no, we have 3 Dobermans.
3 Dobermans. All right.
We upgraded now that I'm publicly back on a show. We upgraded.
Yeah, you got to make sure you're protected and all that. So I love it, man. Well, hey, thank you for joining us, and Seth, thank you. I'm glad you're part of the show now. We'll see you in our next. We said next week, but depending on when you're watching or listening, it's the next episode. So stick around, and thanks for joining us on Profitcast. Signing off.
Sweet.